Hello, welcome. I am Michael Dunn from the U.S. Army's Command and General Staff College, and I have the pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Retired Todd Guggisberg and Lieutenant Colonel Retired Tim Brown, where they're going to be talking about their game that they developed, Landpower. Gentlemen, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. So, Mike, thanks for the introduction. As discussed, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Sustainment and Force Management here at the Command and General Staff College of Fort Leavenworth. Co-presenting with me is Mr. Tim Brown, who is also an assistant professor in our Department of Tactics. As many of you know, CGSC trains and educates about 1,100 to 1,200 students each year. And of that number, approximately 70% are U.S. Army officers that come in as captains and normally leave as majors. About 20% of our students are Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and now Space Force. 5% are mid-career professionals from our interagency partners, for example, State Department, Border Patrol, FEMA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and others. And then real importantly, we bring about 150 international officers from around the globe and integrate them into our staff groups. We give them a master's level program that covers strategy, tactics, sustainment, history, ethics, leadership, and force management. So to begin, I'd like to thank the organizers of Connections 21 for including Tim and me in this as presenters. Listening to some of the other presenters over the past 3 days, I'm very impressed by the hard work being done by this community and you as individuals. So today, Tim and I are going to discuss our efforts to expand analog hex-based wargaming to CGSC through the use of a tool that we call Landpower Division. I will discuss the road that we've taken over the past 3 years. Tim will go into the structure and the mechanics of our tool, and then I will conclude where we think we're going to go in both the short-term and the long-term future. So any discussion of hex-based wargame has to pay homage to Kriegspiel, as well as credit going to other hex-based games that many of us have played in our younger days, as well as continue to play today. The culminating exercise for CGSC students is a division-level, large-scale combat operation in the offense that they plan and execute in the spring of each year. Notably, it's the only exercise at CGSC that the students get to execute their plans and determine the strengths and weaknesses of their synchronization across all of the warfighting functions. So for many years, CGSC used a computer-based simulation tool called Decisive Action. And by 2018, Decisive Action, or DA, was reaching its end of its usefulness. And the college was considering utilizing a new system called Dexters. So in our analysis of Dexters, we found that it came with significant bandwidth requirements, as well as significant training requirements for both faculty and students. And in conversations with Dr. Starrett at our Department of Simulation, he said that they had developed an analog hex-based war game called Landpower GAT. And GAT stands for Georgia, Azerbaijan, which was the region that we were using in the college in previous years. So we came down and take a look at what Dr. Starrett had and immediately recognized the potential for student engagement and battlefield visualization, along with many of the same benefits that Lieutenant General Keller talked about with his first experience with First Battle. Tim Brown and our other tactics instructors found some elements of Landpower GAT didn't meet our learning objectives and our outcomes, and proceeded to modify the game and rebuild it into something that truly met our learning objectives. And with the help of James and Mike, came up with what we think is a pretty good product. The second significant modification to the tool was we transitioned from Georgia, Azerbaijan to a Northeast Europe scenario, which caused us to change the map boards, some of the task organizations, etc. So what you see here is a graphic display of the timeline going back to 2018 and forward to 2022 that details some of the significant milestones of our process. We piloted Landpower in 2019, and based on the outstanding results that we got, based on student surveys and faculty feedback, the CAC commander, then Lieutenant General Lundy, decided in 2019 to utilize Landpower for our exercise across the entire CGSC community. The college proceeded to procure about 80 game sets for the college, and we were poised to execute across the college with Landpower in March of 2020. Of course, COVID forced us into a distance learning environment, and unfortunately, we were not able to use it in 2020. COVID was still around in March of 2021, and we were able to use Landpower in a much more limited way, and I'll talk more about that here in a couple of slides. We expect that in March of 2022 that we'll finally be able to use Landpower Division to the full extent. So we found 4 primary keys to success in developing this program. First and probably most important is senior leader buy-in. Lieutenant General Lundy visited our classrooms as we piloted the program, took a look at both student and faculty feedback. We gained the support of both Army University, CGSS, and CGSC. The second key to success is integrating support from all of the department's faculty. This is not just a tactics exercise, and in fact, we try to keep our tactics instructors out of the mechanics of the game to allow our tactics instructors to focus on student learning, student outcomes, and our terminal learning objectives. The third key to success is Dr. Sterrett and Mike Dunn and Lieutenant Colonel Lord run an elective concurrent with the first part of the course, specifically targeted to our simulation specialty officers, the FA-57s, and some of our key students to train them on wargaming in general and specifically Landpower Division. So what that means to us is by the time we get to the exercise in March, we've got about 20% of our students that are experienced in using war games, experienced in using Landpower Division, and that helps us immensely as we go into the exercise. The last key to success there is we gradually introduce hex-based wargaming to students. So with our experience is that with the new students, about 10% are well experienced and play hex-based wargaming as a hobby. About 30% of the students have a little bit of experience. However, most often it is computer-based strategy and tactics games. And 60% of our students have little or no hex-based wargaming experience. So by gradually exposing them to this tool, we get them by March into where they can utilize the tool pretty effectively. We start that out by utilizing Battle for Moscow, which introduces them to movement factors, combat results tables, combat ratios in a very simplistic way. We move them onto, in February, we utilize a larger scale hex map where the students plan a division movement from ports to tactical assembly areas over 4 ground routes and 2 air routes. And then finally, we use in the division defense exercise in early March, we use elements of Landpower to continue this introduction process. So to compare the 2 years that we actually used Landpower in AY19 and AY21, in AY19, we had student cells of 32 students and 6 instructors. And in AY21, because of COVID, we had to isolate our staff groups, and we executed Landpower in groups of 16. The significant difference was in AY19, we used red, blue, and white cells on separate boards. And in AY21, we combined all 3 cells onto a single board. Now, the biggest takeaway difference from that was that the intelligence and surveillance results were significantly different. And even though we tried to integrate a decoy units and decoy icons, I think both red and blue could see quite early and quite quickly what their opposing course of action was, and were able to react to it in a way that they might not be able to react to if they had to utilize discovery learning and utilize their intelligence and surveillance. The second big difference between the 2 years was the depth of our cell expertise. In most staff groups of 16, we might have 1 artillery officer, 1 intelligence officer, and 1 sustainment officer. And that just didn't give us the opportunity to both conduct current operations as well as exercise the future ops planning that a division staff would normally have. With that, I will transition over to Tim Brown, where he will talk through the structure and execution of Landpower Division. Tim?
Good morning. Morning. My name's Tim Brown. I'm the lead tactics instructor for the Team 17, which is Todd Gugesberg's team. I saw an earlier question. The classification level for Landpower is at the classified level, and that's due to the fact of the audience that we're training is both U.S. students and sister services, but also international officers. So we have some parameters that we have to stay within. I'm going to talk to you about the introduction of Landpower, how we came to it, and the games. If you go to the next slide, please. As Mr. Gugesberg said, as Todd said, Landpower is an amalgamation of Kriegspiel and hex-based games. The real big key to this is it allows both sides to conduct operations, and it is a staff training tool that focuses at the division staff and division level of decision making. AOC in the Command and General Staff Officers course is designed to focus the students at division level and so that they have an understanding of what divisions do on the battlefield when they leave CGSOC. The game does have randomness built into it. It's there to replicate the friction of combat so that even the best laid plans something may happen because of the fog of war, and so they have to make decisions on how do they adjust. And as I said earlier, each side has the opportunity to conduct operations. I understand this is a wargaming conference and all that, but in my world of MDM military decision-making process, wargaming is synonymous with what we would term COA analysis. So I look at this more as an analog simulation. And I know that may cause some consternation, and we can have that conversation at the end. If you go to the next slide, please. So the boards, they're broken down into 3 boards. The white cell board, which governs everything. It's basically, to take a phrase, it's where the sausage is made, and it gives information to the different, the red cell and the blue cell, and based on that information and their analysis, they make decisions. The blue cell is designed to replicate a division's current operation cell and a future operation cell. And so not only are they fighting the present fight, they're also looking at what's going to happen to them 48 hours and having plans for that. And so the information, they provide information to the white cell based on the information and the outcomes of the game, then provide information back to them. The red cell is not as robust, but what we try to do is make sure that we have representation from each of the wargaming functions. And what we do early is we make them, we build what we call the Botnian plan cell, and that's the Botnians are the opposing force that we're going against. And so we take 4 students from each of our staff groups, create a team of 16, and they develop a plan to fight the 4th Infantry Division, who the blue cell is replicating. That way they have all the execution documents so that we don't have free play in the game in the sense that we're playing a game, but we're actually trying to conduct operations. I don't think any Army divisions are using this war game. I know it's been put out to different organizations within the Army, but it's kind of been within the college. Second question, I'm not sure if we would see them using it, but like I said, it's a good tool for them to do decision making. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of a breakdown of 2 of our classrooms. If you'll notice the blue dots, that replicates the U.S. forces or the Allied forces, actually, because we do, in our task organization, we do have a British brigade fighting with us. And then the red cell, obviously, on the left. The white cell is where we have a faculty member from our Department of Joint Interoperations who runs the white cell, plus he has another faculty member there who can help us replicate core inputs. And then we have students from each side who have an understanding of both sides' plans, and they're in there running the game and coming with the outcomes and then bringing those back to the different cells. And so a tactics instructor will be predominantly focused on the blue cell. One tactics instructor may be the exercise leader, and so he may also be the red force commander. And then you have the white cell who is basically providing the information to the different cells for their analysis and their decisions, and that's run by a faculty member. And then we have our Department of Sustainment and Force Management instructor who's going between the two, making sure that they're playing sustainment operations, so that we try to replicate or try to integrate all the warfighting functions into this analog simulation. Okay, please, next slide. So this is a game piece. As you can see, each piece has different colors in the background, and that's just so easy identification. You have the combat PowerPoints on the 4 sides, and it starts with green, yellow or amber, red, and black. The degradation in combat power represents about a 20% loss to a unit. You'll see the hex in the top right corner. That talks about its capability. So if it's artillery, it can range 3 hexes or 4 hexes, whatever its capability. If it's a UAS or a helicopter, it'll tell you how far it can fly within a game turn. On the lower right, you have capabilities that may be added to the organization, air defense artillery or engineers. And usually with the engineers, it's tactical engineers. What I would term tactical engineers or combat engineers, having tactical gap crossing capability, breaching capability, items of that nature. In the air defense world, if it's a BCT, from a US BCT, it's going to be MAD pads or Avengers. And if it's a Botnian, it's going to be missiles like the Crotel. And most of the BDETs, the battalion size elements on the Botnian force, have SA-18s a part of them, and so they have man pads in there. And then in the center, it tells you the type of unit, whether it's an infantry, armor, engineer, artillery, aviation, and that's basically our game pieces. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a demonstration of all of the different types. And this is just a simple demonstration of what we have out there. And we obviously use doctrine to name the units. We try to keep their capabilities within what we would see on the battlefield of them. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So the map, Todd talked about it earlier. We used a 1-to-100 map, and it's the actual topography that's in the area. But what we do is we lay a hexagon that is about 10 by 10, it equates to about 87 square kilometers on this map. And then we put a number. So we struggled with our, as we were building these maps, we struggled with identifying hexes. So we've got a numbering system on it that was like this will say 24, this is the 24th row and the third column. And so that helps us find the different hexes. The other thing you'll see is a number in the center, a highway symbol with the number 3 or number 2 or 1, and that is to determine the terrain, whether the terrain is severely restricted, restricted, or unrestricted. A number 3 is severely restricted, 2 is unrestricted, and 1 is 2 is restricted, 1 is unrestricted. And this is just to affect their movement points. Each turn, a unit based on how fast they're going. So if they've crossed the LD, they can go 10 kilometers per hour, which equates to 1 hex per hour or 3 hexes per turn, because our turns are replicating 3 hours. And so if it's a 3 in that hex, then they're reduced two movement points, and so they move into that hex and they basically have to stop. If it's a 2, it's moved by 1, so they can move to the next hex if they have movement points. And obviously 1, they can just keep moving. The other thing, if you go to the next slide, the other thing we try to replicate is the influences of cities. So we will put convoys like resupply convoys, and if the MSR is going to go through a town, the population size of the town will dictate whether their movement has been restricted. So anything around 50,000 will reduce their movement points by 1. And then as it gets larger, obviously it affects. And we have our convoys move about 30 kilometers per hour. And so that equates, within a turn, they can get 90 kilometers or 9 hexes. And this just makes our students think about, hey, how do I plan my MSRs, my ASRs, and how does the population affect my movement as I try to resupply the forces that are up in the close area. Now, in a lot of hex-based games, the river follows along the boundary of the hexes. We did not do that. So if a unit moves into a hex with a river, then it has to stop. And then we have certain rules that go along with that. So if you have, go to the next slide, please. I think we talk about it in there. Yeah. If you have, as you can see for the built up areas, 1 hexagon for 50 or less. If you start getting up into 50 to 100,000, it's 2, 100,000 above, it's 3. So population, obviously, density of population affects movement. Hydrology affects movement. Even if you have a bridge across that river, it's still going to take you 2 turns to get that brigade size unit across that existing bridge. And that's to replicate that, the planning that has to go into moving units across existing bridges. If it's a river that does not have a bridge, but the organization has bridging capability, the ribbon bridge or something of that nature, or the M3, then it'll take them 4 turns, and that's really to replicate the complexity of river crossing operations, and also to demonstrate the 5 phases of, assault to the river, assault across the river, secure the intermediate objectives, and so on. Swamps are also in there, and they're accounted for in the number of the restricted mobility within that hex. So so each turn has 5 phases. If you'll go to the next slide. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. So in a unit can have what's called a zone of control, and that's its ability to influence the hexes around it. Now, if it's a unit, if there's only like a battalion size or smaller, say a soft team, then they only influence the hex they occupy. But if it's 2 battalion size units or larger, then they will affect the hexes all around them. And as you can see by the numbers in that brigade size element that's sitting in the center there, it's able to influence all the hexes around it. Now, when a unit moves into a zone of control, it has some options. One, to engage the unit in front of it, or if it has combat power or the ability or movement points, it could move to another location, or in other words, to get away from the contact, or move to another location to where the contact is in their best interest. So the zone of control allows you to conduct operations. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to go on to the turn itself. Landpower, there's a sequence within the turn. There's what I term 5 phases. Turns replicate 3 hours, and the 5 phases are information collection, deep area, close area, the consolidation area, and the support area. The deep area, close area, and consolidation area and support area come from our operational framework, and so it's tied to our doctrine. And so what we do is we run each of these phases independently, so they're not all going. It's a sequence, and so we start off with information collection. If you go to the next slide, it'll start getting. So we go to start with information collection, and we use IMIT and SIGINT. Obviously, we have to stay within the unclassed parameters, so we can't. We try to keep it as simple as possible. We do use unmanned aerial systems, satellites, and different capabilities like that. And as part of that, we use imagery and SIGINT and other unmanned ground sensors. So what we do, what a unit or the player unit does, is they provide what's called an information collection report based on their information collection plan that they've developed. And it tells us, so they put that information into the white cell, and the white cell then determines, if you'll go to the next slide. Oops, kicked you out. So it'll go into the white cell, and the white cell will run the game to determine how much information that asset has found on it. Now, this is the collection report in, and they'll say, hey, like Gray Eagle, going along, they have to determine its altitude, its air corridor that's going to, because we talk about airspace management, and then what NAI it's going to look at. Now, you can play where as it flies, it can identify, but we find that slows down the turn. And so really they just focus on the NAI. And then if you go, so what happens is we roll dice based on information. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And we go into this, what's called the information collection chart. And I realize this is a little hard to see, But what it is it says, if you look at an infantry brigade, at 100%, it tells you that if the unit's able to see 100% of the information or the vehicles that are on the NAI, then they'll find out there's 40 BIMP2s there, 6 2S91s, and tanks, and depending on what's all there, you can tell them. And it's designed to just give them, hey, 41 tanks or 31 Bradleys or whatever it is, so that they're doing analysis instead of a lot of times in decisive action, they were getting, hey, this is 1st Battalion, 3rd Infantry. And it's just kind of that, and they would go to their, oh, I know what 1st Battalion, 3rd Infantry has. And so there was no real analysis there. And so this is designed to make them do analysis based on the data or the information that's provided to them by the white cell. And that information, if you go back one slide, that information is provided to them on this, back to them. They fill out the top part, and the white cell fills out the bottom part, tells them how many vehicles there, any activity, and there's some scripting that we go as we go forward. Okay, keep going. Let's go down to the deep area. So the deep area breaks down into 4 parts, 2 big parts, which have or 2 parts, and then 3 parts part of the lethal. So we do EW, electronic warfare. We do cyber under the restrictions that we have in cyber, and that's in our non-lethal. And then we do our lethal part, which looks at both fires, long-range fires, and then fixed wing and rotary wing. Long-range fires, they can only fire in on known observed targets. In other words, things they found through their collection plan or through their counter-fire radar. The fire missions are either whole battalions or half battalions. We do have counter-fire fights, and we do seed. So we really get them into this synchronizing and integrating the different systems as to create the greatest effect on the battlefield. We have fixed wing, the Air Force part of CAS and AI, air interdiction. They have to designate air corridors so that in altitude, so that we have ADA engagements. We are in the process of relooking this. What I initially built has become a little cumbersome and doesn't necessarily get where we want it to go, and so we're relooking that. The other part of this is we try to replicate as much of the Air Force package that's out there. We talk about defensive counter-air, any electronic warfare that they're doing. And then the other one we do is rotary wing, which is deep attack with our Apaches or with the Hinds or from the Bosnians' perspective. And they're just the different rules that are used with them. And there's ADA engagements with that also. We focus a lot of time on the deep area and the information collection phases of this, and that kind of replicates where divisions fight is. And so we try to really keep them thinking about this, about what's next. I often talk to my students about this is not playing chess, or this is not playing checkers, this is playing chess, and you need to be thinking 2 to 3 moves ahead and not get caught in the moment. So the next area we'll talk about is the close area. These are, sorry, keep trying to move fast. You're fine. These are just the different tables that we use. I know you can't read them very well, but we'll talk about the close area. Let's go to the close area real quick. So the close area is where we the brigades fight their fight. The division shapes in the deep area so that the brigades are successful in the close area. And in the close area, we look at, we go through movement. We have, if there's NAIs, then there's information collection that goes out. We do add CAS. But in the end, what it's about is calculating the combat power points and creating a ratio. And if you look in the picture to the right, you'll notice there's a brigade against 2 battalions. That brigade's combat power points equates to 50, and but 2 battalions equate to 14, so which creates the ratio of 3 to 1. we take that ratio and go into the combat results table, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, we have some special rules. One is like hasty attack versus deliberate defense. Then we move to different portions of the column, and deliberate attack versus hasty. I mean, we just try to equate, to give credit to where, if a unit does all the planning and is in a deliberate offense or deliberate defense, then they should get credit for that if a unit's doing a hasty attack or hasty defense. The other thing we've done is to continue to replicate the complexity of a river crossing. If it's opposed, it causes you to move over 2 left columns, and I'll show you that. If you go to the combat results table, sorry. So in the combat results table, if you'll remember, we had a 3-to-1. The reason it says adjusted on there is I went in and I made the 3-to-1 column what I would call balanced. You can win wildly or you can lose wildly, or it's each side loses 1 combat power. And the reason I did that is because our doctrine says we fight on the offense, we want to be 3-to-1, and on the defense, we want to be 1-to-3. So that's why I created the 3-to-1 column to be balanced. I also created a 2.5 and a 1.5 column because what we were finding in the testing is that we would get 2.9 to 1 ratio. And so according to the rules, you have to bounce down to the lowest. You can't round up, you round down. And so you were going all the way down to 2.1. And so to give credit to where they were trying to get to 3-to-1, I created the 2.5 column and the 1.5 column. So, and so you would roll the dice, and then say you rolled a 3 and you look at the 3-to-1, both sides would lose combat power. And now if this was a deliberate defense against a hasty attack, I would bounce to the 2.5 column. If this was a river crossing, I would bounce to the 2-to-1 column. So those rules were put in place to look at the complexity of the situation and also to give credit where credit was needed in the planning aspect. So the close phase goes very quickly, and the key is to not get the students to think about what's next and not get caught into this little fight that happens here. If you'll go to the next slide. So the consolidation area is a lot like the close area. The difference is you have special purpose forces or special operations forces, insurgents, or bypass units running around there. Same rules that are used in the close area, used in the consolidation area. The difference is special ops forces or insurgents can be covert. In other words, they're just observing what's happening within their hexagon, or they can be active and they can engage opposing units or be engaged by opposing, or even go after infrastructure. And so that just kind of adds some more friction on the battlefield. The concern here is, if you look at our doctrine, the consolidation area is like a brigades fight. And so getting the division staff too focused in this area can derail them. What they need to be focused on are what are those problems being caused in that area that affect the division, i.e. A bridge is blown on an MSR. Okay, so what's the decision we have to make? Do we move to the ASR? All that. So we try to keep them at that level, not getting into, hey, we're chasing around two insurgents in this town, or there was an IED that went off that is nothing to, in the far right, far left portion of our area of operation, and it really has no bearing on that. It's just noise. So, and then the next phase is the support phase, or sustainment. So when you lose combat power, you obviously are losing vehicles and personnel. And so we've created loss tables. And in those loss tables, we have number of WI, KIA, and then MIA. And then we've also have a factor where 20% of the WIA are RTD, and after 24 hours, they return or come back. And then we have 3 categories for vehicles. They can either be catastrophic kills, which they never come back, mobility losses, which take about 36 hours to repair, or maintenance losses, which take 24 hours to repair. And so if I get a company's worth of vehicles back up, I can then put that on a resupply mission to the BCT that lost them, and then one of their battalions can rotate up one combat power. So if it was at 7, it could go to 9. And so this causes our sustainers to track the fight and track losses. We really struggled with trying to develop a way to track the different classes of supply or play the classes of supply. So we stuck with days of supply. And so each side starts off with 3 days of supply. And if a unit is not resupplied within 36 hours, they are dropped 2 combat power points, which then affects their ability to fight on the battlefield, and then may affect the division operations. So this causes the G4 section, the sustainment section, to plan resupply and to implement their log plan that they had developed during the planning session. And we do this for both sides, both the blue and the red. And then the only difference is for artillery is it's missions. So 1 day of supply equals 24 battalion fire missions. And so if they shot 36, then they go down 2 combat powers, and it may cause them to not be able to conduct fire missions. So that's the very crux of the game. It usually takes me about 2 hours to walk when I give the presentation to the other faculty members about the nuances of the game. So if we go to the lessons learned that we've come from this, let's go back one real quick. Sorry. So this is our combat loss table, and there's one for each type of unit that's out there, whether it's a brigade, ABCT, an engineer brigade, an artillery brigade. We've developed one of those for each of those. And if you'll notice, a combat loss point, just from an M1 perspective, you're going to lose 4 M1s. If you lose 1 combat power, you lose 4 M1s and 6 M2s. But you have like 8 M1s are out for mobility, and then you have 6 out for maintenance. And so as time goes on, you can get that back. But initially, you lose 18 M1s and 28 M2s when you lose 1 combat power point. So it causes some consternation, and we have to work through. So I'm going to go to the lessons learned. I realize I've kind of given a broad brush of the game. One of the things we've struggled with over the couple of years is replicating higher headquarters. And I think that has a lot to do with the maturity of the exercise and us trying to figure out how we want to put pressure from core above. What I like about this game is this analog simulation, is it does focus the students at division and not maneuvering battalions. So there's a question on there about, can this be tailored to a unit getting ready for the National Training Center? I think the rules will have to be rewritten to address brigade level problems. So, and I have not gotten to that point, but and so that it can be, but I think there's some tailoring of the rules that have to be done. The map is the easy part. Just find the National Training Center map. There's a program that you can put a hex, lay a hex base on it. For brigades, we tend to think that the hex should be about 5 kilometers.
Hey, Tim, if I can make a comment on that. So there was some discussion this last year about potentially putting together a kit for each student to take to their next unit, probably at the brigade level. And it would have a variety of map boards that would cover jungle, plains, desert, and Arctic regions. But so far that hasn't been resourced, and it's still in the discussion phases.
The aspect, so the part of the game that takes the longest is the information collection and the deep area. Which we didn't realize that when we built it, but as we played it, that's what it is. And it's kind of ironic because where does divisions focus? In the deep area and information collection. And so it's kind of played out that way. What I really like about this analog simulation is that it focuses at division, students at division, so we're not maneuvering battalions, and it allows students to visualize the whole division's area of operation, and it allows them to understand the relationship between the deep area, the close area, the consolidation area, and the support area. I think a lot of times when you look at CAX-based exercises, they tend to, you get focused on the screen and you can't see the how wide or how large the division AO is. And we were always, we were constantly, the students were talking at division level conversations. We weren't getting into, hey, let's take this battalion and move it over there. And the one beautiful aspect of this game is that things don't go the way you want them to go. You can reset really quickly and then go back and rerun that turn and learn from where they made their mistakes. Maybe they forgot to do seed or something like that. So we can do quick AARs on what's happened. So that the reset portion is really good. Now, obviously, with everything we do, we constantly are reviewing it, and so there are some changes. Landpower 8, version 8 will probably be coming out in July. It will have, I'm going to clarify the artillery engagement. We're going to develop a new fixed wing portion. My DeJamo professor who taught with me this year, he and I are working on that. He's a Air Force backseater, and so we'll work through how we can better replicate that. Looking at the collection and loss tables, making sure that we're providing the best information, and looking at possibly adding electronic warfare to the information collection phase, because we learned some hard lessons this year. And then making sure that direct support fires are part of the combat ratio in the close area. So that is the crux of Landpower Division. Mr. Guggesberg has some, Todd has some other things he'd like to talk to you about.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I'm going to abbreviate the where we're going slides here just a little bit to give folks an opportunity to ask questions or comment. So there's really 4 things that we're looking at in the future. The first 2 are short term, and the second 2 are longer term. Tim already talked about, from the short-term standpoint, we need to make our sustainment simulations and situation more stressful on the division staff. And we might do that by a combination of injects as well as starting the division at less than optimal combat power. So we might start them at 80% combat power and 60% of supply, days of supply on hand, instead of starting them out at 100%. The second piece is we're gonna take a look at our special operations forces, specifically thinking about putting our SOF officers in the white cell to help replicate that flow of Corps and Army level intelligence and surveillance coming down to the division. From a longer term standpoint, back in 2019, we had the Italian Staff College get wind of what we were doing with Landpower, and they came over and took a look at what we were doing, and came away pretty impressed. So they went back to Turin, Italy, and developed a brigade level similar hex-based war game for their students. We went back over there and looked at what they were doing with that war game, and had the idea that perhaps we could embed the Italian brigade into the 4th Infantry Division and simultaneously conduct a training exercise across the opposite sides of the world here. Now that's got a whole set of technical challenges. Dr. Sterrett and Mike Dunn, Lieutenant Colonel Lord, and us will be looking at trying to solve those and perhaps do it in a limited way here in AY22. And then the last long-term change is the college is probably transitioning from a UCOM scenario to an Indo-PACOM scenario in AY23. So to keep Landpower relevant, we're going to have to, of course, develop new map boards and think through some of the unique environmental challenges or changes that Indo-PACOM presents. So, how do we handle over beach movements and combat power? How do we replicate some of the unique weather conditions that occur in Indo-PACOM? Second, we'll have to take a look at task organization changes. Certainly, we would be more reliant on IBCTs and less on ABCTs. And we would have to change our definition of combat power from systems-based to perhaps squad-based combat power. And then lastly, there's an increasing emphasis on using our multi-domain capabilities such as cyber and space and integration between the Marine Corps and the United States Army in Indo-PACOM. So with that, Tim and I would like to open it up for questions for about the next 10 minutes.
It's looking like that most of our questions were addressed throughout the presentation. So if you have any closing comments, this would probably be the good time to present those.
Okay. Well, I would like to just reemphasize a couple points that Tim made. What we see as the key advantages to using Landpower over the computer-based simulations is that student engagement that we get in the classroom. So rather than having 16 students looking through their straw at the battlefield on their computer, they are gathered around the table. They're having very important discussions about how they synchronize warfighting functions. And there's a tactics instructor or a sustainment instructor looking over their shoulder and helping to coach them and guide them through that complex problem set. And then the second point worth emphasizing is that we keep this as best we can at the division level and not at the brigade level. The tendency for all of us is to want to get down into the close battle and the knife fight and see how that plays out. And the reality is for the division staff, they are in the business of setting conditions, of shaping the battlefield to enable the brigades to have success. So we think it's a very powerful tool in our classroom. We will probably make some attempts to expand hex-based wargaming in the college in the future based on our success. And lastly, Lieutenant Colonel Lord, Dr. Sterrett, Mike Dunn, thank you for putting this together. It seems to be extraordinarily well run. And again, it's good to see the community of practitioners out here helping to make our forces better. So thank you very much and have a great day.
We do have one additional question that came in.
I got it, Mike. So we already do incorporate the Air Force. That is one of the things that I was very when I built or when I started writing this, it was one of the things I wanted to make sure, especially with how we're looking at business within that. As for the Marine Corps and the Navy, well, if we go to Indo-PACOM, I think we'll have that adjustment. And the whole idea of how does naval gunfire or any of that stuff we'll have to look at. So the potential is there. Right now, like I said, we do incorporate the Air Force. We live by the air tasking order and the effects that we want the Air Force to help us achieve. So it's there.
And if I can also just chime in, Dr. Sterrett and I, along with Colonel Lord, as part of the simulation team, we're always looking at what our sister services and coalition partners are doing in terms of gaming in all the other different domains. And so we basically provide trends that are happening in the other domains to the Command General Staff College faculty so they can incorporate that into the game design.
The question about doctrine, to this point, no. The game, what we've designed, we live within our doctrine, and so it really hasn't driven any changes within the doctrine. So,
I would suggest that maybe not suggested changes to doctrine, but it has helped reveal some of the weaknesses in our doctrine. So, and I'll as a sustainment officer, I'll use reconstitution as an example. So, as the students are trying to rebuild combat power rapidly, we start getting into discussions about reorganization and reconstitution. And frankly, it wasn't until just recently that we actually got an updated reconstitution doctrine. And so I think the experience in the game has both faculty and students realize that there are some things that we no longer really practice in terms of doctrine and things that we need to emphasize.
Yeah, to add on that, one of the things that we did this year is we had a mass cal exercise where we had a brigade basically lose 3 combat power points during the exercise. And so what does that mean to the division? And so we, between the division G4 and the G3, they had to come up with a plan. One, how do I evacuate all these casualties? Where are they going? And so we worked our way through that. And I think that's something, especially as we discuss large-scale combat operations, we have not thought much about since, well, probably since the 90s, and because of what we've been doing. And so it has brought some things to light to the students. One of the things, another in casualties, is point of injury. A lot of students are used to medevac going to point of injury. That does not happen in large-scale combat operations. And so having that discussion as we go through the exercises is very beneficial. And it really opened some eyes that, hey, we don't have enough capability to take care of large amounts of casualties. So.
Okay, I think that takes care of all of our questions. I'd like to give a heartfelt thanks to both of our presenters here, Todd Guggesberg and Tim Brown. This was very informative, and as a colleague working with them over the past couple of years putting this together, I am really, really thrilled to see how this organic effort grew. This was something that was done as an initiative from the faculty, by the faculty, for the faculty, and the students. On behalf of Connections US 21, thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.